Anyways, oh boy, Xbox. There's a lot of things that are happening with Xbox. Let's talk about it, shall we? We got a video here from Young Yeah. I'd be curious to see what he's actually going to say because I did see videos from Moist Critical, right? I'd be curious to see if Young Yeah is going to be talking about it, say like, oh, Xbox is fucking up, all this other stuff, and all this other shenanigans. Like, what is Xbox doing? Why are they laying off so many people? Blah blah blah. It's because they've been making bad games. That's the reason why. Plus, Sounds AI is going to make things even more expensive. Sounds AI, Sounds AI. What do you mean Sounds AI? I mean, during the COVID, there was an influx of new gamers. Of course, there was an influx of new gamers. Of course, because everyone was stuck indoors. At the end of the day, there's not really much you can do. Hey, Duma. Oh yeah, now that I remember, I did learn project management while in college. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or so I don't even know what's going on in the Western side if they're even learning that. To be frankly honest, because apparently it's more dominant in the Eastern Asian side. Let's take a look, shall we?
So, let me get this straight. You announce Senua at Xbox Game Showcase, new entry in the Hellblade series from Ninja Theory. And then days later, you announce that you're going to shut down that studio?
Well, yeah, because their last game fucking flopped. What do you expect? I'm like, they did really good in the first game. But then, the last game before this one or so basically flopped. What do you think? Young, yeah, what are we talking about here? Oh yeah, I kind of forgot or so. He kind of really doesn't do a lot of research or so, and like kind of like looks at the landscape as a whole. Like, I keep forgetting about that. He's not really that kind of type of person.
What the F? Like, what's going on? What is this? I mean, that was like one of the marquee flagship announcements at that showcase. And then not even...
No, it's not. That is not one of the big showcases who are super excited for a Hellblade game. The people who are more excited or so is a Gears of War game and a new Halo game. Those are the games that moves console sales. Not a Hellblade game. I don't think the new CEO of Xbox is doing layoffs. It's just how they planned before the new CEO took position. You can't lose money for a decade and not expect to go bankrupt. Rip DMC, DMC2 from Ninja Theory.
Like about a week later, you say you're going to try to shut down the studio?
Are you talking about that one DMC game from a while ago?
Let's break this down because there's a lot going on here. Just a lot happening at Xbox in terms of
it's definitely not
shutdowns.
A console seller.
And yeah, this is just all not a good look at all for this company.
I have to object
actually, Sharma was on a roll with some like good announcements. But like with these latest developments, a lot of people are starting to question once again the future of Xbox. So in my last video titled Xbox in Crisis as they prepare for reset, I talked about this blog post right here alongside other elements that highlight the challenges that Xbox is facing as they move forward. And Asha Sharma and Matt Booty posted the following statement that they sent out to employees on June 10th, 2026. And they talked about challenges, how they're competing for attention, how they have a 3% accountability margin, how that's down year over year, how they've spent over $20 billion on all these things, but they've just been in decline. Our annual revenue has
I wonder why it has been declined, I'm like, take a look at what's been happening in the Xbox ecosystem, for God's sakes, Shit. I'm not an Xbox person, but I can definitely take a look at what's happening over there. Yeah, that remake, which was called Devil May Cry DMC. Yeah, it said it twice. Really? I've never played the game. That's the only reason why.
Decline nearly $500 million during that time going forward. This cannot continue. That was the big emphasis here. Alongside the hardware component crisis caused by AI with rising costs of computing components because AI is holding all of those components, so on and so forth. They have some steep hills to climb. And amidst all this, something that was very clear is that major layoffs were coming. Bloomberg reported right here that amidst this reset situation, the Xbox division is planning major...
Because at the end of the day, right? I don't understand. Okay, this is the one thing I don't understand, right? I get it. Losing your job sucks. Don't get me wrong, right? But how come this has become this weird shit that like we have to feel sorry for people who lost their jobs when they made a shit product? When did this when did this thing became a thing or so? Like it's not like people felt sorry for me when I lost my job, you know? There's nothing like that specifically, you know? I'm like if you do something shitty in your job or you fuck up something in your job, expect to get fired or have the studio get shut down. If the whole entire studio is just doing fucking who knows gobbledygook, you know, and they decided not to turn a profit or anything like that, you know, low key Microsoft did damage to Xbox. You really think so? I wouldn't be surprised if that's also part of the equation too, as well. Like I said, right? Did you lose your job? Why? Oh, for some stupid shit. Like I said specifically, right? It's just kind of like it just makes no sense, you know, in general, you know. Like that's the thing. That's the thing. That's the thing itself. Like I just don't understand why are we like why are we like specifically like saying, "Oh, I feel so sorry. Oh no, you lost your job. Oh no, no, no." You know. But it's kind of like, well, they haven't done anything that like super significant for them to be staying. You know. If the profit margin is going downwards, if the graph is going fucking downwards and it's not going upwards, I'm like, in a business standpoint, I would just shut them down. I would cut them off. Be like, nah, man, it's over, man. You've already failed too many times, you know? And also at the same time, there's other like equations to be like, we can't keep up the cost for you guys. We're gonna have to shut down your studio. I'm like, what, you want fucking Xbox to bankrupt themselves or something?
Job cuts, as well as they're planning to slash budgets for marketing and some other areas of the business. Satya Nadella himself suggested that Microsoft has to turn Xbox into a sustainable business, how they're not monetizing entertainment as much as they should. There's more monetization of Xbox games happening on YouTube than at Microsoft, claims Satya Nadella. But then the
Well,
real
yeah, of
ominous part
course.
came when Chief Strategy Officer Matthew Ball talked about how they want to invest more in its big IPs while cutting back on niche productions. And
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, that's the reason why, you know? Because the system sellers are literally the Gears of War and the fucking Halo, you know? But like the niche one, like South of Midnight, you think South of Midnight is going to be a console seller? Do you think Hellblade Senua is going to be a console seller? At the end of the day, console players just don't play new games at the end of the day. So Microsoft are also pushing AI, which brought up component prices. Asmund said they need to shut down the whole Halo studio and buy Bungie and make Destiny 3. That'll never happen, to be honest. That will never happen. Go and be like Darth Vader and the Force choke people for too many failures. No, I'd be Gordon Ramsay or so and literally yelling at their faces or so and be like in Spanish too as well, just insulting them in Spanish and everything and just be like, ¿de qué es este pinche caca mierda, ah? ¿Ah? ¿Tú quieres jugar este juego que es puro caca? ¿Ah, pendejo? Hacémelo otra vez. Comienza al principio otra vez, pendejo. ¿Ok? A la verga, puta madre.
I said in my last video that I thought that was a bad idea because it's from niche productions where you get some of the most creative outputs that, sure, maybe start out slow, but eventually can grow into something big. That's how you nurture studios. You take the people making small
Not
but
if they make fucking shitty games, no. Why the fuck would I invest my money or so on like a shitty studio that literally did not turn profit whatsoever if I spent this much money or so? You telling me, if I remember correctly, if you invest $100 million into fucking South of Midnight and that game did not turn a profit, who the fuck is gonna be mad the most? Me, because I invested fucking 100 million into that fucking studio. Let's be real. Let's be honestly real around here, okay? All right. I don't understand a single thing, but it sounded bad. Yes, it did. Microsoft doesn't have infinite money. They can't keep losing money every year. Exactly. They can't lose. I don't understand why are we having this like weird sympathy thing about like certain studios like that are failing, bleeding money, sucking up money from the actual publishers, right? and thinking they're like, oh no, game studio is shutting down. Oh no. But it's just kind of like, brother, are we serious here? I'm like, they've been failing or so. Microsoft buys like 10 companies a year. They literally don't care.
Unique things that eventually
And they kind of
become
been caring
massive,
as of
like
recently.
genre definers, and make a huge mark in the realm of gaming. Ever since then, we have seen a number of like questionable developments, starting with the departure of various Xbox Game Studios executives. For example, Xbox Game Studios Craig Duncan has stepped down after more than 18 months in the
Well, Rare Studios was barely even used at all. Like it's been sitting there collecting dust all the damn time. The last game they've ever made was literally wasn't it the pirate game? Was that the last game that they made? Right?
role. And this is someone who's been at Xbox for a while. He's been a part of the Xbox organization since 2011, best known for running high regarded UK developer Rare for nearly 14 years. He was at one point promoted on November of 2024 to
Yeah.
boss of Xbox Game Studios, replacing Alan Hartman, and oversaw, all of these studios right here. And alongside him, Xbox Game Studios Chief of Staff Luis O'Connor will also be leaving the company at around the same time. There's also someone from Rare who joined Rare back in 1999 and then rose through the ranks to become an executive at Xbox Game Studios. The reason behind their departures
It
is
cannot offset because they have been noticing that they are reducing the cost for everything. If you would have saw earlier, so they literally said that they are reducing the cost and doing layoffs because they cannot keep this up any much longer. So,
unknown, but Craig Duncan in
and also
particular.
at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised or so if the CEO of Xbox is trying to cut ties. Well, I wouldn't say like cut ties, but doesn't want Microsoft to get involved. So that means I'm wondering if that also reduces the funding or so from Microsoft to some pedicure or degree. And at this point, that's what the CEO wants to do, is to like basically like cut off these shitty ass studios that have been making like not great games, basically, and having to turn profitability without going back to crying to Microsoft for money.
Had a pretty short tenure in this position before he's like, I'm out. And so that's already like, okay, that's a little weird. But then comes these reports right here signaling massive studio shutdowns that highlight the strategy of how they no longer want to invest in niche productions, that they want to stick to big IPs. So these rumors began with Mike Straw from Insider Gaming, who talked about how two of the studios have been told, including getting messages from employees at the locations who are scared, that are being prepared for the chopping block by Xbox, are Compulsion and Arcane. Despite public messaging, many within the studios have expressed real worry and have overheard conversations about the future of the studios. Compulsion, for those who don't know, are the developers behind games like We Happy Few and South of Midnight. And then Arcane is known for games like Dishonored. And then there is Redfall, which was helmed by
Yeah, but Redfall was a dud. It was a massive dud.
Arcane Austin. That subdivision was shut down. Arcane also created Deathloop, and most recently,
Deathloop wasn't even that great either. Let's be honest here. Deathloop was fucking. I remember Deathloop. They fucking advertised the shit out of that game, and it felt like they were fucking deep throating our fucking throat with that game. Like no joke. I shit you not. Like it was an okay game, but it was nothing like that crazy in my personal opinion.
they were working on a new Blade game that seems to be going nowhere.
I
This
bet you that Blade game is gonna be really bad. To be honest, that's all I gotta say about that.
was announced a while back, when we've heard nothing about it since. And with Arcane in particular, there's a French journalist who corroborated Insider Gaming's claim. Apparently, Sylvain Trenel, journalist at BFM-TV, one of France's largest news channel, the French equivalent of CNN, responded to Mike Straw's claim regarding Arcane being at risk of closure by stating the following: I'm not a famous American insider, but I can confirm this. The closure of Arcane Studios isn't a potential risk. It's a reality much closer than you might think.
Okay, then start making actual games for gamers then. If you make games for gamers, you wouldn't have this problem. That's all I have to say, you know?
And then beyond that, all of this was further corroborated by news outlet Kotaku, who published the following article on June 15th, 2026, titled Xbox is planning to shutter Peabody Award-winning South of Midnight studio Compulsion
Peabody
Games.
Award?
And this is something that Kotaku themselves learned through their own sources. Now, later,
What
Kotaku...
the fuck is a Peabody Award? What the hell is that? Developers of Peabody Award-winning South of Midnight? What did they win? What's the award that they won? Compulsion Leadership is in negotiation with Microsoft over the studio's fate, but the details of these negotiations have not been disclosed. No, they shouldn't rehire these people whatsoever, to be honest.
Now, later, Kotaku updated the article to highlight that, according to one source, Compulsion Leadership is in negotiations with Microsoft over the studio's fate, but the details of these negotiations have not been disclosed. And then came this article from news outlet Bloomberg from investigative reporter Jason Schreier. The headline here reads, Studios and Microsoft's Xbox division brace for closures. In this case, beyond Arcane and Compulsion, other studios are listed as well for potential shutdown. So scrolling down, you'll find the following quote. Several studios in Microsoft's Xbox gaming division, including Compulsion Games and Double Fine, the developers of Psychonauts, which is like this really beloved IP, maybe kind of niche, but, Psychonauts 2 was highly beloved, are in active negotiations to spin off as they try to thwart closure. And same thing goes with Ninja Theory, the maker of Hellblade.
Yeah, but the last Hellblade was not good. I'm like, here, out of curiosity, right? Right? Just out of curiosity specifically. What was the last game that they made? Was it Hellblade 2? Right? Yeah, they came out like a few years ago. Jesus fucking Christ. Jesus, oh my lord. Well, that sure says a lot, to be honest, in my personal opinion. Hey, Des. I'm like, that's 4,000. Now, my question is, how about the, 5,000 as well, to be honest. I'm like, at the end of the day, right? I don't think it sold that much. I don't think it's record breaking, I'm just saying. Don't worry, things will stabilize. I don't think these numbers are going to stabilize, in my personal opinion. So, and then also, I just want to take a look at it. Let me see. Six out of 10. It's a 6 out of 10 game. .4, 6 for the lowest, So it doesn't look like it's the strongest or so. Let's see, what about the first one? That got a higher score because it was generally like something that was completely different, But I don't think in the second they didn't push it a little bit further. And I heard, I think, So let's see. So the criticism of Senua's Hellblade 2 largely centered on the game prioritizing cinematic presentation and visual fidelity over interactive gameplay and pacing. Well, there you go. That's the reason why, The simplified and shallow gameplay combat felt much more restrictive than the original game, lacking targeting and variety. The environmental puzzles were also criticized for being overly basic and repetitive. Linearity and pacing. Players described the experience as a walking simulator or an interactive movie on rails. A slow movement speed and lack of exploration felt like an artificially padding to many users. Short runtime, clocking in at around 6 to 9 hours. Many players felt the experience was too brief and linear just to justify the $50 price point. The narrative flaw, some reviewers and players felt an overarching story lacked the emotional resonance, introspection, and poeticism of the first game, occasionally coming off as predictable and anticlimactic. Well, there you go. There's your reasoning why this game just did not do very well. It flopped. That's it basically, you know? Adios, ay cuídate, Duma. People who made the original must left a long time ago. Let me see. I can find out real quick. Did the original While many developers who worked on the original game Hellblade are still at the studio, a major creative pillar of the studio, co-founder Tamim Antoniet, the writer and director of the first game, officially left the company prior. Well, there you go. There you go. The reason why the first game was better is because the writer and the director left. The chief creative director of the co-founder left Ninja Theory before launch of Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. He was only involved in the early stages of production. New creative leads. Hellblade 2 was headed by a trio of creative leads environment. The art director Dan Atwell, visual effects director Mark Slaters turns to an audio director David Garcia. So studio co-founder, the other original co-founders who launched the studio originally as just Ad Monsters also transitioned away from the direct active management as the company over the years. Well, there you go. So the studio closure reports in June 2026, major news broke that Microsoft reportedly decided to close down Ninja Theory. Though the studio and the staffs are currently in active talks seeking a buyer to regain their independence. Staff retentions, despite the high-profile departure, the departure of Antoniades, and the ongoing studio closure negotiations, the majority of the working level development team that shipped the first game remain intact for the sequel. But yeah, but the main writer, you know, well, also the second game barely had any combat. Yeah, it didn't have any. It was just a walking simulator. Like it was super predictable, super basic, and everything like that. That's the reason why the second game just didn't do very well. Like it actually failed, you know. Because they prioritized cinematic presentation and visual fidelity. That's basically all they did, you know? The visual fidelity is only going to get you so far if the gameplay is like non-existent. If you wanted to make a movie, just make a movie. Not a video game. If you want to make like, if that's what you're going to do, then that's, you know.
So what that means is that the studios will have the opportunity to buy themselves back from Xbox and go independent, although many employees will likely lose their jobs as a result. So right now, Xbox is definitely saying we don't want these studios under our umbrella anymore, and there are two options. Either we close these studios down, or these studios hopefully have enough money to buy themselves back and go back to being independent. And then there's, of course, the potential third option of these studios go to other companies and publishers who can buy them off so these publishers can release their games under their umbrella.
I feel sorry whoever actually buys them, to be honest. I really do.
That's another potential way that they could be saved. And those negotiations are ongoing, but if it happens to be that any one of these studios don't have the capability to buy themselves back from Microsoft and Xbox, they will be closing down. So that possibility is very real for
They
Ninja
won't make a
Theory,
new
for
one.
Compulsion Games, and for Double Fine, as well as maybe even Arcane. And with Ninja Theory in particular, it's really freaking baffling. This right here is the Xbox Game Showcase that was streamed just days ago on June 7th, 2026, where one of their flagship announcements was a Hellblade sequel, Senua, coming out in 2027, developed by none other than Ninja Theory in collaboration.
I wouldn't say flagship game in my personal opinion, but that's just me anyways.
Collaboration with Xbox Game Studios. For this very studio, days later, like a week later, to be put in jeopardy for the release of this title to potentially not be something that is possible just days after this announcement. I've never seen anything like this. And what makes all of this more of a rug pull and all the more baffling is that not too long ago, one of Xbox's executives, Chief Content Officer Matt Booty, promised that these kinds of studios and these kinds of games would be preserved, that they're an important part of Xbox's future. Right here,
Not if money is on the line. If the money is on the line, that's a different story. You start changing your tune real fast. I'm just saying.
have an interview that Matt Booty did with Windows Central, which was published on February 24th, 2026, kind of right as Asha Sharma came in to become the new CEO of Xbox.
Yeah, because she probably realized how fucked up they really are because of what Phil Spencer basically did, you know? Of buying these studios and having no profitability in return, you know? I bet you that quarterfinal income or so that showed up or so in the springtime probably gave them a real wake up call, at least for her specifically.
Scrolling down through this article, you'll find one segment that is particularly relevant to this ongoing situation. Right here, Windows Central reports that they asked if there will be room for the smaller, more intrepid, and potentially niche creative Xbox studios in this new era. Windows Central reports here that Matt Booty straight up said that that type of creativity remains core to Xbox's gaming philosophy. Here's the full quote that was cited by Windows Central from Matt Booty. The first conversations Asha and I had when we first met to do all this, to her credit, she immediately emphasized supporting our studios and our games. Our ecosystem is built to be a portfolio of everything from small games to ongoing franchises to the big blockbusters. We are built at our core to build everything.
Small games? How is it a small game when you're spending $100 million on South of Midnight? How is that considered a small game? Yeah, that's his actual name. Yeah. Explain that to me, to be honest. How is that considered a small, I know it's childish, but goddamn, it's funny hearing and seeing that the dude last name is Booty. Yeah, it is kind of funny that his name is Matt Booty or so. I feel sorry that, I wonder what their parents thought or so when they named their kid Matt Booty. But like I said specifically, right? How is that considered as a small, small studio, if you're spending $100 million on it and get no return investments on it? Explain that to me.
From Kiln to Call of Duty, everything from Minecraft to South of Midnight. That's right, this game was mentioned in this interview, the very game whose studio is now about to get shut down if they can't buy themselves back. That's core to how we're set up, said Matt Booty here. And then he continues with, we're dedicated to it, and here's why. I believe that almost everything big started as something small. I do not disagree with that sentiment. That's why I do believe niche productions are so important, to nurture them until they get that growth that allows them to become like the next FromSoft.
If nobody wants to play their game, they're just dead weight, to be honest. Explain this to me specifically, Young Yeah. If you nurture this small indie studio, but nobody's playing their game, is it even worth even investing more money into that studio? You got to look at it at the business perspective point of view, not just literally just the point of view. Be like, oh no, they lost their jobs. Oh no, I feel sorry. Oh no. 200 to 300 mil is a AAA norm, so 100 mil can be considered small, quote unquote small, I'm like, but take a look at freaking Expedition 33 with their budget.
That's also a game development studio that started with niche productions, and it took him many years and a lot of iterating and a lot of different kinds of games before they became as big as they are now. That's the kind of nurturing that leads to those kinds of, big juggernaut studios in the games industry. He continues, we cannot lose the ability to have those places where little sparks can grow into something big. Well, you're certainly
Not
about to
unless that little spark never grew to begin with, in my personal opinion.
lose quite a good chunk of that with these studio closures. And I don't know, maybe Matt Booty was ultimately relaying what Asha Sharma, who is ultimately the CEO of Xbox, relayed at the time, but she very clearly did a very quick 180 and changed her mind if that is indeed what she told Matt Booty. And the thing is, this is not the first time that Xbox executives have lied through their teeth or made promises that never panned out. Phil Spencer did something similar when talking about those smaller studios and how important it is to support them, only to try to shut down Hi-Fi Rush developer Tango Gameworks. This was something that happened back in May of 2024, and thankfully, Krafton bought Tango Gameworks and acquired this studio before it could be shut down.
Oh god, not Crafton. Oh god, not Crafton. Crafton was the one that was causing problems or so for that one game or so, the underwater game, whatever that game is called or so that just recently got released. I'm like, there was a whole fucking like shit show with that one, to be honest. That's why that are considered indie with 10 mil budget.
With Hi-Fi
Yeah,
Rush being one of the
Subnautica 2.
most critically acclaimed games of that year and having reached like millions of players. Sure, in part through Xbox Game Pass, but still, there was definitely a lot of potential that was shown with this IP and the future that it could have if they kept reinforcing it. And that's just one of many examples. The fact remains that throughout Xbox's recent history, it's been shown time and again that Xbox executives' words can never be trusted. They will 180 at a moment's
Matthew
notice.
Balls?
It's happened
What
so
are they
many
forming
freaking
the
times
cock or
that it's
something?
becoming impossible to trust these people. And that's why rumors like these are spreading right now. There's been rumors spreading that amidst
Matthew Ball. That's crazy. That's a crazy ass name to have, to be honest.
all this, Microsoft might be planning to reverse course on Xbox exclusives. During the Xbox Game Showcase, you may recall that they announced that certain games like Gears of War E-Day and Clockwork Revolution will be coming to Xbox exclusively, that they would cancel their release on PlayStation and Nintendo. And basically, executives have stated that moving forward, exclusives will be a big part of Xbox's strategy. And rumors have been spreading that this may not be the case anymore, that they might be like kind of doing a 180 yet again when it comes to
What's with these
exclusivity.
names?
Now, Matthew Ball, an executive at Xbox, did come out saying that these rumors are false. Gears of War E-Day and Clockwork Revolution will stay exclusive.
Yeah, of course.
There are no conversations and there have not been any conversations to reverse course.
Yeah, of course.
And as we said last week, players can continue to expect signature exclusives from us every year. But who's to say that, much like with previous statements that executives have made where they have made a 180 turn on, this won't get a 180 turn, months down the line. Windows Central puts it aptly here in reporting on all of this in their latest article. People have been taught by Microsoft not to trust Microsoft. They have bullshitted us too many times for gaming enthusiasts and for the public to feel as though executives' words have any weight whatsoever. But yeah, all of this has already become a big topic on social media outlets like Twitter, where people are, talking about this in full force and the implications of all of this and all of the, broken promises surrounding these kinds of studios that were supposed to be preserved and were supposed to be a key part of Xbox's strategy moving forward. Double Fine, the Psychonaut developers, already posted this emoji right here in response to all of this, basically going like, of course, like, what the fuck? Almost like laughing at the absurdity of it all and them just struggling to survive despite the fact that they make bangers when it comes to...
Okay, so my question is, right? So let me go. Double Fine. So they're called Double Fine Studios, right? So let's see. So Double Fine's Productions released 3 distinct titles in the last 5 years. Their recent release showcased a mix of highly anticipated sequels and creative experimental new IPs. Kiln, a multiplayer party brawler focused on pottery creation and destruction. Players sculpt ceramic battle armor on a wheel in use of a 4v4 matches where the goal is to douse the opposing team's kiln. Are you guys excited for that game? That's kind of crazy in my personal opinion. Keeper, an atmospheric puzzle adventure about a spirited seabird and a long forgotten lighthouse, released in October 2025. It is a shorter scale narrative game available on Steam. Oh yeah, that game. Yeah, I wonder how that did, to be honest. Let me take a look at it real quick. Do we need to discuss about the numbers here? Do we really need to discuss about the numbers here? What's the other one? Psychonauts back in 2021, the major cinematic platforming adventure game. Of course, this game was. Of course, this game. Let's see how this game did. I assume it did pretty decently well, at least. But I don't think the fan base is that massive, though. Yeah, just as figured as much, to be honest. But the problem is, right? This was a pretty successful game, right? And compared to their other games, at least, this was pretty much successful, but not in the overall arcing branch or so of it being, majorly popular. Probably not, to be frankly honest. Yeah, to check if any of them succeeded. As I said, indie studios is many failures and one success. Like at the end of the day, when you look at this specifically, Keepers, I assume this game hasn't been released, right? No, it's coming out in 2026. There's nobody, so I don't think this specific game is out? Question mark. Oh, never mind. This game came out. When the fuck did this game came out? This game came out in April? Well, no wonder. There's only 5 people playing it and only 193 people playing it. So like so okay, so let's go back a little bit, okay? So we're gonna look at graphs, right? We're gonna look at graphs specifically. So, So as you guys can see, right? They got a okay bump, They got a pretty okay bump. Out of all the games so far, at least in the past 5 years, this has been a somewhat successful game, right? 191 overall players. 193 overall players. As you guys can see, the trajectory is going downwards on these games. All right? Now my question is, right? How much, let's see. Psychonauts cost like 15 million to make. That's 15 million in the early PS2 dollars. So 15 million basically it cost. Okay. And then what about Keeper? No publicly available, so we have no idea, to be honest. We can't show that. They don't know the information on that. And then what about this one? and not publicly disclose, pretty much. So that's basically it. At the end of the day, if they didn't even move the needle, not even an inch or so from these two projects in general, my question is like, is it even worth for them to be kept around and pumping in money into this studio? Probably not, in my personal opinion. But that's just me, anyways.
Of course, like what the fuck? Almost like laughing at the absurdity of it all and them just struggling to survive despite the fact that they make bangers when it comes to games. People are coming out with statements like these. Toys for Bob dodged one of the biggest bullets in gaming history getting out of the Xbox ecosystem when they could, because yeah, who knows, Xbox might have shut them down as well. Toys for Bob currently being best known for the revival of franchises like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. Same goes for Moon Studios, the developers of Ori, and most recently this like Souls-like game called No Rest for the Wicked, the like Diablo-esque style version of a Souls-like. Ori once upon a time belonged to Xbox, but they decided to go independent. And I mean, yeah, this is another studio that might potentially be on the chopping block if it were still under Xbox. And funny enough, the creative director actually talked about this whole situation, how heartbreaking all of this is, and talked about while a reset could potentially be good, it also depends on how such a reset is handled. And with Ori specifically, he talked about even when we were making Ori with Xbox, it was clear that the main focus was still Halo, Gears, and Forza, even though gamer excitement around Halo and Gears had already cooled heavily after Bungie and Epic moved on from those franchises. Basically talking about how Xbox focused too much on the past instead of trying to build new things and hiring the right people to make those new things, to properly manage new IPs as well as old IPs even. I mean, the state of Halo right now, while campaign evolved, does look good. Halo Infinite should have been like the big flagship for Xbox Series, and that was just woefully mishandled. Moon Game Studio CEO says that Ori and Moon could have been the start of something new, but the powers to be were probably too focused on the past for that to happen.
Ori and Moon could have been the start of something new, but powers to be were probably too focused on the past for that to happen. Is he saying that like Ori and the Moon could have been the new flagship for Xbox games? Is that basically is what he's referring to, right? I'm trying to read this, like trying to understand this. Is that what he's like implying here? Seems pretty massive in my personal opinion for you to be claiming that kind of a thing. I'm like, don't get me wrong, it was a good game and everything like that, but you know, like it was like I'm not saying it was not a good game, you know. They got Forza. Well, their main title flagships or so is like literally Halo, Forza, and freaking Gears. You know.
And highlights how great games are not made by IP, they're made by people, the very people who are about to get laid off, and also the very people at managerial positions who have mismanaged a lot of these projects and IPs. He emphasized that we have seen what happens when you own all the best IP in the world but don't have the right people in charge. Bet on the people who can do right by those IPs and not just on IP. I think these are very apt statements. People are also highlighting on social media events like these when Phil Spencer announced Xbox is acquiring 5 new studios, and among them were Ninja Theory and Compulsion Games. Fast forward almost a decade later, and look at where we're at with those studios at the brink of shutdown.
I'm like, their games didn't do well. I'm like, what do you expect? Why are you gonna pump money into a studio that's not even doing well and not bringing in the money or the revenue at least?
With, you know, a slim chance of saving themselves if they can somehow accrue the funds to buy
take a
themselves
look at Call
back.
of Duty.
Now, there are certain
are still
realities
buying
that
it.
are worth highlighting about some of these studios and their games. Simon Pullman, who is an entertainment lawyer, kind of pointed out these numbers right here. And I don't know how true these numbers are, but he claims that South of Midnight had a development and marketing budget that totaled over $100 million, and its sales were roughly in the 500,000s. While that game did reach 1 million players, That's in large part because a lot of people played that game on Xbox Game Pass, which is a subscription service that has not seen enough growth to really subsidize, some of the loss in sales that you get when you launch games on Xbox Game Pass. And in contrast to that, Simon highlights Stellar Blade, whose development and marketing budget was $50 million, but managed to sell 6 million copies. That's a major profit margin right there. And then back to Xbox side of things, The Outer Worlds 2's development and marketing budget totaled $100 million. That game only sold $1 million, whereas like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, its development and marketing budget was roughly $40 million, but that's a game that sold 5 million units and made quite the profit. So he says right here, at a highly reductive level, it's as simple as that, and it's hard not to see this trend continuing. It's ultimately about the numbers, it's about the revenue and the profits. That's what corporations ultimately care about.
I am curious on something. So Celebrate was generated approximately 80.6 million in revenue for its developer Shift Up. In the annual financial report, a hit and action game has crossed 3 million in cumulative sales across PlayStation 5 and PC. So the total sales of the game has surpassed 3 million units sold globally across platforms. Steam launched following its PC release. The game sold 1 million units in just its first few days on Steam. The player base before the PC release, the game already had over 2 million players on PS5. The annual revenue from Shift Up reports a record within the actual revenue, reaching up to $204.8 million, which marks a 31% increase compared to the previous year. Celebrate contribution of the total revenue. So the Celebrate specifically brought in 80.6 million in total earnings, a 70% jump in royalties from the prior years, bolsters heavily by the PC port. Well, there you go. PC players. PC players are, again, brought in the revenue for it, because at the end of the day, it was only exclusively on PlayStation before it came out on PC. So, of course, it sold, but it didn't sold that much, to be honest. But then when it came on PC, well, you saw the big revenue jump in 70%. And that says a lot, to be honest. And at the end of the day, money does talk at the end of the day. So
But at the same time, he makes a great point to highlight that Xbox takes the brunt of the blame here for allowing its studios to make these games in the way that they did. It's a huge failure of management, and in some instances, the inmates were evidently permitted to run the asylums. Something like
wasn't this like, didn't they say, I don't know if I remember this, I'm trying to remember this specifically, didn't like Xbox say like they wanted the studios to do their own thing and they have no say in word of their creative freedom? Isn't that basically what that was or so back in the past? I could be totally wrong or so, but I'm trying to, or I could misremember or something, but I remember them saying something like that along the lines.
Midnight, which is like brand new IP, while it did win some awards, and while it did have
What are these
impact, and while generally
awards?
people find compulsion to be a studio with a lot of potential, that's a game
No.
that $100 million budget was ridiculous to give. Like, I don't know how Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has a smaller budget than South of Midnight does. Like, when it comes to these kinds of games, you always have to assume the worst case scenario when providing a budget. And who knows, South of Midnight may have blown up, in which case that would have been great. But the assumption has to be that there's a brand new IP from a studio that's still getting its footing when it comes to being a big name in the games industry. And a $100 million budget was always like a dumb idea. Like they should have gotten half that at best. It is very much a managerial issue. It is very much a budget management issue. It's not an issue of like the talent of these developers. It's just about like how money is handled and how these projects in general are handled. Because if you give these kinds of studios like Ninja Theory and Compulsion and Arcane and Double Fine the right trajectory to steadily move upwards in, their capabilities, in their budget, in their production value, and in their ambition, then they can become juggernauts. But if you immediately throw them into like $100 million budget, like, what are we doing here? You know, you're killing the potential of these studios to grow steadily over time.
But
And
what Dark said or so, this is the new budget of small, you know, whatever indie or small fucking game, you know? That's what Dark is saying, you know? Because at the end of the day, the rise of cost has gone up for video games. So
to get a footing in the games industry, because all of these studios have immense potential, and now they're at risk of that team and all that institutional knowledge going down the drain because of that mismanagement. There's no denying the talent at these studios. There's no denying the creativity of their output. But, you know, they were not ready for the kinds of budgets that they were given. And with the potential of their closures, whatever potential nurturing they could have had to become as big as FromSoft and CD Projekt and grow to that level has been completely squashed. Like, you've completely ruined that potential unless they manage to either buy themselves out of Xbox and save themselves, or, you know, pitch themselves to other publishers and companies who will buy them and like actually give them the right trajectory, hopefully. But with all said and done, the numbers are the numbers, right? If you give a company a $100 million budget and they, you know, nowhere near come close to that, and ultimately end up being a huge money loss that is being subsidized by Microsoft, and that happens enough times, then yeah, I mean, from a business standpoint, Microsoft is bound to be like, okay, we have lost enough money on this, we got to start making some cuts. And that's really ultimately what it comes down to and what's happening here. But at the same time, Microsoft is one of the richest corporations in the world, right? And it felt like they were giving, you know, studios like Ninja Theory with with the announcement of Senua at the Xbox Game Showcase, a chance that they were continuing to invest in the nurturing of these studios, only to learn that like they would go as far as announcing them at the Xbox Game Showcase days before engaging.
I want to see something real quick, just out of curiosity. So Microsoft releases Xbox's report 4 times a year in the month of January, April, July, October. So I assume they got their revenue in April, right? And then July would be the next one. So July covers the spring calendar quarter from April to June. Oh, so this is April and June, and that wraps us Microsoft fiscal year. So they probably like are seeing this specifically here. This is basically is what they've saw to make them change to a different tune.
In its potential closure and the potential demise of this whole franchise. And at this rate, I think Paul Tassi puts it aptly here, Microsoft is basically going to become just Activision Blizzard, Bethesda, and Halo Studios at this point. Maybe Obsidian if they put them on a Fallout game, but I think Obsidian is in danger because both Avowed and The Outer Worlds have not been doing well as franchises
of course not.
in recent releases.
And
all of this goes in line with recent reports that CEO Ashish Sharma is planning to speed up the development of IPs and games like Halo, Fallout, and Elder Scrolls, and kind of investing a lot more in those kinds of big juggernauts, which I'm not saying they shouldn't, but like just focusing on those and then not having those niche IPs to rise and to become the big next new thing, and focusing just entirely on the past and existing IPs, I think that's a trajectory that ultimately will lead them to just kind of plateauing, from a creative standpoint, or even potentially from a financial standpoint, because these juggernauts right here take so many years to make, and the smaller niche games, those are the ones he can more consistently output while pushing the boundaries creatively, and also nurturing these studios so you can have like a good slate of like really veteran studios that can put out juggernauts and whose name will invite a lot of attention. So yeah, I don't know what the future holds for Xbox. I don't know how this reset will go. maybe in the long-term future, a more focused viewpoint on Xbox will benefit the business, but it doesn't change the fact that if the closures of the likes of, Ninja Theory and Double Fine and Arcane and Compulsion end up going through and they end up ruining these studios that they acquired and they promised they would
No, I'm
nurture,
good.
like it's still going to be a massive stain on Xbox's history as a major player in the games industry. Xbox already had a massive steep hill to climb, and it feels like they just shot themselves in the foot along the
No,
way,
I don't
not
think
really
so, to be
setting
honest.
themselves up for a great long-term future. All of this feels like very like short-term reactionary thinking. But I don't know. I suppose only time will tell. But I have a bad feeling about all of this
No.
and the chaos behind the scenes that it takes for a game to be announced just days prior to its studio closure reports and negotiations and talks. It's just an indication of an organization that does not have its shit together. But at the very least, that's one man's take. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on the potential closures of these studios and what you think about all of this in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on.
It's a good video and everything like that. I have, but at the end of the day, he's a lot of incorrect at the end of the day. So, the big corporate buy to shut strategy should already be an illegal anti. Okay. I don't know, man. Well, yeah, young, yeah, your take is kind of sucks. Not gonna lie. I'm like, we just basically just looked at like what games that they specifically made these studios, and we looked at their numbers and everything like that to get a rough estimate of basically it just didn't sell. You know, it like definitely did not made any profit in return. Definitely not 100%. I'm like, what are you expecting? Yeah, of course, it is their fault, but that's during the COVID era. Everybody did the same thing, not just Xbox. Xbox isn't the only one, you know? You have Sony doing the same thing as well. I'm like, let me see. So the forum discussion generally places the budget between 40 million and 100 million, reflecting on 7 years of development cycle, about 80 to 100 people. Uh, so okay, so how much did it make? How much did it? Thank you for the follow. Welcome. So it only made 6.3 million out of their between 40 to 100 million budget. So yeah, the Hellblade 2 sales were disappointing. Yeah, of course. There's Luke's video right here that literally explains, on the actual like problem itself. And like for a studio that as a financial year ending June 30th of 2025, this success was largely bolstered by the intercompany's arrangement and the title's successful release on PlayStation 5 in August of June 2025. Because of Hellblade 2, the primary design of the subscription-based release on Xbox, blah 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 blah. The direct retail figures were relatively low. For instance, on Steam, the game only saw a peak of roughly 3,900 concurrent players at launch. However, the game achieved Microsoft's core goal of driving platform engagement on Game Pass before seeing renewed profitabilities from its debut on Sony's console. But overall, it really did not make any profit in return. So, plus also there were so many criticisms about the second game in general. Compared to the first game, the lead writer literally left from the first game once the second game came out, he just fucking left. So I'd be very curious to see what happened actually behind the scenes with him. If it would be nice to have a conversation with him. It's like, what what made you leave? Was it like creative differences, or like you just didn't like working with them specifically, or did something like rubbed you the wrong way for you to leave? I'd be curious to see why did the writer left for. If we got any info, he wanted to move on from the company after releasing the first game. While he originally intended to depart earlier, he ultimately stayed on for about 2 additional years to help transition the team to oversee the early development stage of Senua Sakabata. What you thought of the story of the sequel compared to the first game? Any specific you look at? I think definitely something has happened. But I'd be very curious to see like what was the reasoning why. But yeah, overall, that's kind of like basically it. Like I have to disagree with a lot of the things he has to say, but it is what it is at the end of the day. But yeah, anyways, that's the end of the video, and peace.